All right, here's lesson 2, our video cast, Challenges to Slavery, picking up where we left off with that time period from Bleeding Kansas, 1856, moving on into 1859, violence out in the West, controversy in regards to the spreading of slavery, popular sovereignty rules, but we're going to see that that's going to change, and it's going to change with a Supreme Court case, Dred Scott. Here's your essential question on the left-hand side. What's the impact of Dred Scott, Harpers Ferry, and its impact on the election of 1860? What were the characteristics of that election, so on and so forth. This might be something you could look at taking a look at for your left side, and some left side review for this lesson as an option. In these pages in the old book, there are some short readings on the Dred Scott versus Sanford case that you could summarize, or you could summarize them out of the notes and create this kind of a graphic organizer. What are the lasting effects? What's the resolution or outcome of the Supreme Court case right here in this area? You can do this graphic organizer or some variation of it. State and congressional elections in 1854. 1854, again, Kansas-Nebraska Act also triggers the formation of the Republican Party. The Republican Party explodes onto the scene and challenges pro-slave Whigs and Democrats very solidly. If you kind of check out the chart and the map there, congressional seats are lost significantly from both parties, and especially in the North, of course, since it's the party of the North only, making it a viable party and a very threatening party here in the political balance of things. They take a lot of seats in the House and several state governments. Of course, most of this is all in the North. 3/4 of the Democrats in the free states lost their positions, replaced by Republicans. And so the Democrats are becoming a party of the South largely. Not gone from the North, but largely a party of the South. And here again is that chart a little closer. Presidential election of 1856 comes around, and we have that Republican Party throwing up a candidate right away. The Whigs fell apart. They had no candidate because they're split up by the issue of slavery, Northerners and Southerners going their own way. John C. Fremont of California, he was also a hero of the war against Mexico, an explorer as well, came up with a slogan that's somewhat familiar: free speech, free soil, and Fremont. Democrats, James Buchanan of Pennsylvania, notice he is a Northerner. The Democrats being largely a party of the South now, a lot of those Democrats may be shifting more to the other party, but you notice the Democrats choose from somebody from the North to try and get Northern votes, that Democratic Party of the South. He really wants to avoid the slavery issue. He wants to appease Southerners and save the Union. Again, promotes also the idea of popular sovereignty, but again, we're going to associate popular sovereignty most strongly here with that guy from Illinois, Stephen Douglas. The third party here in the election of 1856 that is a little bit influential, but is mostly significant because of what people are experiencing, or America is experiencing this time. That's an influx of immigrants since the 1840s, very heavily, with the Irish and the Germans coming in, and the population total of about 3 million, mostly being Catholic, don't like them. They're trying to pass laws limiting immigration. Note that for what we talk about soon. They don't like these people. They're not quite like us. And of course, slavery becomes the issue that causes this party to kind of fall apart and split up. And in that session, in their meeting, they discussed the repeal of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Those Northern Know-Nothing Party people say yes, the Southerners say no, so the Northern delegates walk out and they go toward the Republican Party. 1856 results, we can see that all of a sudden we have clear lines. Here's our Republicans in the North, Democrats still a little bit in some northern states, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Illinois, Indiana. If you were to do a little bit of math here and you said, what if these went to the pink side of things? Would it be different? John C. Fremont would have been president. We'll see that these places switch, and it will help Lincoln become president. Other than we got California out here going Democrat yet also, but we can see that solidly the South is Democrat, and that's a phrase to remember. Maybe annotate and write down: solid South Democrat, starting about here now for a while, for a little while. And basically, this election is showing that we have a divided country with rigid sectional lines for our political parties. Fremont doesn't get a single electoral vote south of the Mason-Dixon line. Again, that is the Mason-Dixon line, Pennsylvania and Maryland. All right. So, election 1856, telling us to what's to come. Popular sovereignty, again, is the idea that each state or territory should decide on the issue of slavery independently. The federal government is going to stay out and go with whatever the people want. And Democratic, Republican, Southerners love that. But this case is going to throw things into a tailspin and a tizzy. 1857, the Dred Scott versus Sanford case comes around. Dred Scott, if you remember from your civics class, was a slave living in Missouri with his owner, who was a doctor in the military. He actually even traveled into Wisconsin Territory, which is partly Minnesota today, I have to add, and basically was traveling around in some free states that banned slavery. And so when he returned to slavery, his owner died there, and there was an anti-slavery group that tried to start pushing him to sue for his freedom based on the fact that he was living in places that were free, and he should sue to be free based on being there, and it was prohibited there. So it goes through several court cases and levels of the court system. In 1857, it hits the Supreme Court, and Justice Taney, who is a Southerner, who is the Chief Justice of the court, issues a decision on the case, and he says Mr. Scott was a slave, thus he's not a citizen of the United States. He has no right to sue your property, so he shouldn't be here in the first place. Residence on a free soil didn't make him free. Slaves are property. He also says that, if I take property away, property can only be taken away when some sort of a law has been broken, and there's been due process of the law to show that the law has been broken. I can't take property away from somebody. So as property, he's protected, and the owner is protected under the Fifth Amendment. So I can't do it because of that. And at the same time, he takes it even a step further, and this big number 3 here is what you want to star. Congress has no power to prohibit slavery anywhere. Any compromise that Congress has made previously, then, he basically says, is been illegal. It's been unconstitutional. The 1820 compromise that set up that 36-30 line, and then also so is popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty is giving people the right to say no to it if they so choose. He says that is an opportunity, and if they were to say no, would be illegal. And by setting that up through Congress, popular sovereignty was allowed and set up through Congress, that process in that compromise of 1850, and allowed in the Kansas-Nebraska Act, that is illegal. And so the country becomes divided even more, and nothing can really thus stop the spread of slavery. And in fact, the whole purpose behind the formation of the Republican Party is, illegal. And the Republican Party's main issue is they want the repeal of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and they want to stop the spread of slavery. It's unconstitutional, can't limit it. So this throws things into a tailspin, great rage and anger about this. The Supreme Court is protecting slavery. Congress is protecting slavery with the Kansas-Nebraska Act. It spills over into other races for congressional seats around the country, in particular, the most important one here being the 1858 election for a new senator, or to keep a senator's seat in the state of Illinois. This is where our little giant Stephen Douglas comes back in, wants to be a presidential candidate. Lawyer, short, stocky, very powerful in Illinois from Chicago. We talked about him before, basically the author and proponent of the Kansas-Nebraska Act that brought about a great amount of violence in Kansas and brings about the party of Lincoln. Isn't that kind of ironic? Brings about his opponent in this Republican. Lincoln himself being pretty much unknown in terms of the political realm. He had served in Congress during the Mexican-American War for a term, but then was voted out. Kind of seemed like he was lost to the ages at that point in time. He himself felt he was kind of lost to the ages, but this slavery debate kind of reignited him and brought him back. And it was some of his speaking ability during his term in Congress that got him some notoriety. He was a pretty successful lawyer and was known by some connected people, but not considered to be a major national figure. But this set of debates that happens in this campaign to be senator in the state of Illinois brings him to national notoriety amongst the Republicans of the North. And so Douglas didn't like slavery, but he didn't want it to hurt the nation's growth and development. Again, he's the king, the superhero of popular sovereignty. Lincoln, super intelligent, comes from a very different background than most politicians for the most part, at least the very powerful ones for the most part, pretty successful lawyer, great rhetorical, argumentative skills, highly intelligent. We know he's very highly intelligent, read voluminously, and had some strong opinions about slavery. And so Lincoln challenges Douglas and asks, why don't you and I just travel around the state of Illinois and pick a few spots here and there and speak openly to people out in the open air about this slave issue. And Lincoln had a plan in mind with this, and he was going to challenge Douglas on his popular sovereignty idea. And especially on the side here, you want to annotate, he's challenging Douglas on the idea of popular sovereignty in light of now the Supreme Court saying Congress, no one can limit slavery anywhere, not even in the free states. All right, no laws can be passed limiting slavery. They are property. You have to protect it. And so he asked the question, can the people of a territory legally now, based on what the Supreme Court said, legally exclude slavery before becoming a state? And Douglas says, why, yes, by refusing to pass laws protecting slaveholders' rights. This became known as the Freeport Doctrine because it was discussed and debated and stated in Freeport, Illinois. Right? Very important doctrine to know. Freeport Doctrine, popular sovereignty, yes, even though the Supreme Court says no. So he's challenging the Supreme Court. And you can imagine that the people of the South really are happy with Dred Scott because now you can't put any limits. There isn't even an opportunity for people to vote against it. But Douglas is saying yes. So you can imagine how Southerners feel about Douglas now, not necessarily liking this response, and that's going to hurt him in the upcoming election. Other famous speeches, House divided itself, cannot stand, comes out of this tour, so on and so forth. Freeport Doctrine, what is it? It is a series of debates. That's the wrong choice, right? It should be here. D, Douglas' idea that slavery could be excluded by refusing to pass laws protecting the slaveholders. Disregard that little star, that should be there. Forgot to fix that. The Lincoln-Douglas debates continued going on beyond that. The debate also gets into, trying to understand a little bit about how Lincoln really sees slavery. Douglas tried to paint him as kind of an abolitionist. Most Americans would not favor abolitionists. Make sure you note that abolitionists are crazy radicals and a minority at this time. Lincoln did not want to be associated with them because he would not get elected to any office as an abolitionist. He said that he wants them fully equal to whites. And Lincoln says, I do not want them fully equal to whites. I want them in the right to eat bread, which is his own hand earns. He is my equal, and African American is my equal, and the equal of Douglas, and the equal of every living man. So just the right to be able to work and freely work to serve and live on your own is what he supported at the time. The real problem is between those that think slavery is wrong and that don't. The Republican Party thinks it wrong. Again, the Republican Party wants to stop, not abolish the slavery. They want to limit the spread of slavery so it doesn't grow, and maybe eventually over time it will basically dissipate if free states can dominate, and this is the fear of the South. So these debates bring Lincoln to great notoriety. Douglas wins the election, Lincoln loses, but he wins a national reputation through his oratorical skills and his simple way of describing things. It really caught on with people. And when you look at this map, I mentioned to you that the nation is really kind of like, even like a bucket of Neapolitan ice cream with different flavors. As you go south or north, you get to one flavor of extreme or another, and then in the middle, it's kind of a mixture of the two. And here we can kind of see the Whig Party in the middle. We can see that democratic, libertarian, free living, don't tell us what to do kind of thing. And right across here at the border in the South is Kentucky and slavery. So you can see and imagine that there's been some spillover and some diffusion of ideas and life and culture there. And as you go further north, that Republican thinking, anti-slave thinking, goes in a different becomes more dominant. Right. So that brings us to October 16th, 1859. The raid on Harpers Ferry in Virginia. If you remember, John Brown and his sons hacked to death some people that they felt were pro-slave people at Pottawatomie Creek, Kansas. They run for their lives and they go back to the east and they start connecting with abolitionists and start hatching their own plan to start a slave insurrection. Now this is West Virginia and Virginia as we see it today. This was really all Virginia at the time. His plan to end slavery was to try and start a slave insurrection. And his target was a place called Harpers Ferry, which had a federal arms depot, a military depot where the military and the government housed weapons and such. Break into it, give it out to the slaves in the area, run around screaming, slave revolt, give them weapons, go out and attack and kill your masters in their beds, free other slaves, spread out into the hills of the Appalachian Mountains as you see here. This is one of the rivers that runs down into Washington, D.C., the Potomac River eventually, so on and so forth, so it's pretty close. That whole event involved some very significant people. The event is so dramatic and so strong that images of him come out afterward, especially after the Civil War, which this one did, that kind of portrayed him as almost kind of like a Christ-like figure here. You can see him spreading his arm in terms of the crucifix, but more than anything else, as kind of a biblical Moses, the Bible in one hand, the wrath of God in the other, and Moses leading his people to freedom and cleansing the land, but with blood in this case, and him acting as an agent of God. And so there's a lot of symbolism there, and historians would really say that he is kind of the nail in the coffin that brought it about. On our website, on my class website, there's a quick video there. I'd really encourage you to watch it. It goes through that actual event and what happened in the town of Harpers Ferry, and historians talk about how Northerners reacted. Some loved him, abolitionists being those people. Others who weren't abolitionists said, you can't do this, we can't have violence like this to get change, it's just inappropriate at any time, and Southerners just were absolutely aghast at what happens here. And the results here is he's defeated, convicted of treason, he's hung, put on trial. Anti-slavers call him a martyr. Finally, something's doing something. So the abolitionist movement gets kind of rallied by him, but in the South, they're convinced that the North is full of John Browns everywhere, and Southern militias begin organizing their militias. And in a sense, this is maybe the beginnings of the Confederate Army, if you look at that video clip. So here's your essential question. Some details about it. You can use it to do some work on the left side, maybe look some political cartoons or some other materials, visuals, and such that might fit what's talked about here. Summarize those things, watch that short video clip, and be ready for this possibly be quizzed on in the next class. Have a great day. Thank you, and good night.